Hey guys, Mulligan here, and welcome to part 2 of my preview of the upcoming Eternal set, the Dusk Road. We'll be talking about some of the cards from the upcoming expansion that have been spoiled up until this past Tuesday. As with the Omens of the Past preview videos, I will only be talking about the cards as far as their use in Constructed, unless the card is absolutely terrible in that format, in which case I will briefly talk about its potential use in Draft. Let's hop in. First up is Milos Azalea, Heir to Rebellion. This is a 3-power 2/3 unit requiring 2 fire influence to play. When Milos attacks while wielding a weapon, you get +2 power this turn. And Milos also has Gunslinger Ally, where he gains double damage. So LSV wrote an article revealing this card along with several others in this video. It also revealed the details on how the new ally mechanic works in the Dusk Road. I'm just going to read what the ally mechanic is word for word from the article before we get into talking about this card. So here's how ally works. Each ally ability has a type, which is frequently, but not always, of the same type as the unit itself. When you have another unit of the type that ally calls out, the ally bonus goes off. It doesn't matter which order the units come out, or if the ally dies. As long as the unit with ally saw another unit for even a split second, they get their ally bonus. In the case of Milos, he gains double damage if you have another gunslinger, and from then on gets to keep it. The ally bonus doesn't go away, even if both partners die or are otherwise removed from play. If the unit with ally leaves play, then returns, comes back from the void or gets bounced, etc., it can get the ally bonus again. For something like ally +2/+2, this stacks quite nicely. So this absolutely confirms that the Dusk Road is a tribal set. In the case of Milos, it's actually not very difficult to get the ally ability activated. Nearly all the playable Gunslinger cards in Constructed are in Fire, Justice, or Shadow. Champion of Mystery being the one-off, though technically he is in Shadow as well. I think Milos will very often be effectively a 4/3 when he comes into play. Just in Stonescar alone, you've got Rakano Outlaw and Argentport Instigator on turn 2, and then the lady herself, Bandit Queen, on turn 4. Not to mention Cabal Countess. Rakano has Champion of Glory for their turn 2. Argentport has a few gunslingers that have seen play in the past. Even Skycrag has Vadius, and Alpine Tracker has seen Fringe play before. I really want to talk about this first ability though. I think that Milos giving you additional power to ramp you up to 6 power on turn 4 is very interesting, assuming you don't miss your power drop. Power acceleration is typically something that is only relegated to Justice and Time. Maybe there's a slower Rakano strategy that's possible in the new set with Marshal Ironthorn, who is also a gunslinger, by the way. Maybe even Praxis might find a use for this, but I think that will depend on if this set offers good weapons and gunslingers and fire and hopefully time. It sounds weird to say that time would get a gunslinger since they are known for things like dinosaurs, mages, mystics, and explorers, but we have Desert Marshal after all. LSV also stated that the ally mechanic is not limited to units, which brings us to the next card, Inquisitors Halberd. This is a 3-power relic weapon requiring 1 Justice and 1 Shadow influence to play. That's +3/+1, and Valkyrie Ally, where you gain +2 armor. So with this, we can assume there will be more Valkyries in the next set. I just hope that some of them are playable and constructed because we just don't have enough Valkyrie support to make a decent deck currently. All we have are Valkyrie Enforcer, Valkyrie Spire Guard, and Inquisitor Mokto. I know Argentport midrange in its early days ran exactly this package, and people found success with it, but it didn't really stick around. Most of that can be blamed on Tavrod though. I think we need at least 1, maybe 2 playable 2-cost Valkyries, and maybe another playable 4-cost one would be nice. Maybe even a 6-cost one. If we get those, I expect this to see play in Constructed. I also expect this to, at best, be a 2-for-1 weapon, even if we do get everything I just mentioned. It'll be pretty rare if this gets to kill 3 or more things. The next card is Scale Tender, a 4-power 3/3 unit requiring 1 time and 1 primal influence to play. She has Dinosaur Ally, where you create and draw a 3/3 dinosaur with Overwhelm. So it was mentioned that ally abilities have a type that's usually, but not always, the same type as the unit itself. Scale Tender is the case of not always the same type. If you think about cards like Evelina Valley Searcher, then this type of ally combination makes sense. The stat line is a little underwhelming, but the ability has potential to make up for it. This card pushes the Dinosaur Explorer tribal decks more towards a token strategy, and other cards like Xenonobelisk and Teriax Hatchling already support that type of deck. My concern with this card is that the ally mechanic only activates once, so if you wanted to keep generating 3/3 units, you'd need a way to consistently remove Scale Tender from play and be able to play her again. Bounce effects come to mind, since Scale Tender would go back to your hand in that scenario, but we currently only have a few playable bounce effects. A Teleport and Praxis Displacer come to mind, but Safe Return has also seen fringe play in Constructed. I don't know if a permanent card with a bounce effect like a Relic of some kind would be good for the game. Scale Tender has constructed potential, but I think we need more bounce effects, and we might even need more playable dinosaurs. The next card is Drakh Arctic Artisan, a 4-power 5/3 unit requiring 2 primal influence to play. When Drakh hits the enemy player, play a snowman with strength and health equal to your number of Yeti. Yeti Tribe is getting some more support, though that's not surprising given the theme of this set. What's interesting is that Drakh pairs well with Jotun Punter, a spoiler I talked about in the last preview video. I still don't think Drakh will make Punter playable though. The more obvious synergy is with Wump Party Starter, since you get immediate value when Drakh hits play. Of course, you'll need to heavily invest in Yeti units, and while there are quite a few Yeti cards already right now, most of them aren't viable enough to build a serious constructed deck. Drakh's playability will depend on what else we get in this set. The next card is Stella the Shotcaller, a 3-power 2/2 unit requiring 1 Justice Influence to play. She has Aegis, and when Stella attacks while wielding a weapon, each gunslinger and weapon in your deck gets +1/+1. I love this card. So the article talked about this having synergy with Milos, and I assume they're allies based on what I read. Rakano might be making a comeback with these two, because they have some of the best weapons in the game. However, I think Stella also has potential to be used in an Argenport deck. She is not the new Bartholo by any stretch. But what's interesting is that Bartholo is also a gunslinger, so he gets buffed if you stick a weapon on Stella and attack with her. Argenport not only has access to the same hammer might that Rakano does, but Shadow also has Lithrai Falchion and dueling pistols, a weapon I still feel is underrated based on some testing I did. Now, you're not going to be able to curve her into a buff Bartholo since you'd have to top deck him on turn 4, but I'm interested in trying some Argenport shenanigans with the two. The faction has enough gunslingers they could play if you really wanted to. She reminds me of Navani, but thanks to the Aegis, I don't think Stella will have the same problems that Navani does. The next card is Ask for Directions, a 2-power spell requiring 1 time influence to play. It has Scout, and when you attack with 2 or more Explorers, draw Ask for Directions from your void. This is definitely worse than Royal Charter, a card that I said was deceptively good in the last video, but I'm starting to have second thoughts on it. We'll see what happens with it. Anyway, Scout is roughly worth half a card, probably a little less than that. The issue with this card is that it does nothing if you end up keeping the card you scout for on top of your deck. World Charter at least only costs 1 and sticks around to draw cards later on, albeit for 6 power. This is a spell that gets discarded, and then you not only have to attack with 2 units to get it back from the void, but the units have to be Explorers. And even when you get it back, you have to pay 2 power to use this again. Not worth a card slot at all. There are too many other cards people will end up running in an Explorer's deck over this. Maybe some weird spell-heavy combo deck with a Legion Trailblazer could use this, or even a deck with cards like Fevered Scout or Sandglass Sentinel. I doubt it though. This isn't even a consideration for a draft pick. This might be the worst rare in the entire set. The next card is Jump Kick, a 1-power fast spell requiring 1 primal influence to play. You give a unit +1/+1 and flying this turn. I don't really have a high opinion on this card either. The buff is nice, the flying is nice. The problem is I fail to see why anyone would run this card over Levitate. This might have been good if the constructed format in Eternal was split up, with the standard format only allowing cards from recent expansions, and another format allowing all cards, similar to Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone. But we're not at that point yet, though it's interesting to think about. I just don't see any reason to run this over Levitate. If I was in Huru, I might even run Elder's Feather over this card, since that at least gives a unit flying permanently. And Elder's Feather isn't exactly a staple in every Huru Flyers deck. This is at least a decent combat trick for draft though, especially if the draft portion ends up being what is rumored, which is 2 packs of Dusk Road and 1 pack of every other expansion, since you can't get Levitate and Jump Kick from the same pack. And the art on this is great, A+. The next card is Crown Watch Quartermaster, a 6-power 2/4 unit requiring 2 Justice Influence to play. You may pay 6 and exhaust Crown Watch Quartermaster to give another unit +1/+1 for each of your units. And this also has Valkyrie Ally. You play 2 2/2 soldiers. Another card that has an ally ability attached to a different tribe. I'm not completely sold on this guy being constructed viable. The stat line is well below par for a 6-drop, and he's pretty easily removed by most decks at that point in the game. Paying 6 and exhausting him for the buff removes an otherwise okay blocker during your opponent's next turn. But let's assume you will have a Valkyrie already in play when this guy comes down. You get 6/8 worth of stats split up into 3 bodies, so he does give some immediate value for 6. If all of them stick, then the ability nets you +3/+3, which will at a minimum buff a 2/2 token. That might make up for the exhaustion. I still think Valkyrie decks would need to be able to generate a lot of tokens for very little cost in order for this to be viable for constructed, in my opinion. Quartermaster himself kinda does that with the ally ability, but I don't think it's enough from what we've seen so far. He's got a better chance of seeing play in draft, even if you can't get the ally trigger, though I'm reluctant to say how good he is there. The next card is Yeti Sage, a 2-power 1/1 unit requiring 1 fire influence to play. He has double damage, and an Entomb ability where you create and draw trail stories. Basically a 2/1 for 2 power, which isn't that big of a deal. He does give you incentive to equip him with a weapon if you really want to take advantage of the double damage. Also, Jotun Punter has synergy with this. I still don't think Punter's good enough to see constructed play though, at least until we see the rest of the set. The Entomb ability does look annoying, but no one has been able to break trail stories in Eternal yet. But maybe it doesn't need to be. Card generation can be powerful because you don't have to give up precious deck space to fit the actual card in. As much as the game frustrates me, I think some of the Hearthstone designers understood that very well and why their Discover mechanic is so well received. Trail Stories isn't good enough to be put into just any deck, but it's pretty good utility if it's created from another card. That said, I don't know if Yeti Sage himself will find his way into any generic unit-based deck either. Whatever he ends up in will need more than a small amount of spells to take advantage of the free Trail Stories. And the final card for this video is Nametaker, an 8-power 6/4 relic weapon requiring 3 Shadow Influence to play. When an enemy unit dies, the enemy player discards each copy from their hand and deck. So I'm excited for this card in Constructed. What's nice is that you don't have to swing with this weapon to take advantage of the effect. The problem is the cost. It's not only the 8 power, which is steep, but it's the triple Shadow Influence, which I think is arguably even steeper. Armory isn't going to be able to just slot this bad boy in. I'm personally hoping that this ends up in another type of Fire Justice Shadow deck, but something that is much more like Argenport Control, where fire is the splash for stuff like Rise to the Challenge and Quarry. The issue though is that this possibly competes with other high cost shadow cards like Azendel's Gift and The Last Word. Even Sword of the Sky King competes with this, since that's a little easier to play. I'm still hoping this shows up in Constructed down the road though. I just really like the card. Thanks for listening to my thoughts on the spoilers from the upcoming Dusk Road set that we got up until this past Tuesday. There was another card that was spoiled that had to do with a new mechanic that was recently revealed. along with some other cards. So I will review those as a group in the next video. Anyway, if you like this video, feel free to hit the like button. Let me know in the comments if you have any feedback for the content and what brews you guys are thinking about trying when the new set finally drops. But I've got other Eternal content on this channel as well, so feel free to look around. And thanks for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I will see you all soon. Take care.